Greetings and welcome to the Home Slice. This is a standard intro. If you already know what's up with my 40mm Manila Rope testing, the ANDE rope test, then you can skip to this time listed on screen. This is where the actual edge test begins. If you haven't been here before, then you've caught me in the middle of a testing series where I'm taking Victorinox knives because they're simple steel that's mainly just steel. There's not a bunch of extra alloys and carbide things going on in them. And I'm testing what different sharpening stones do to them. I'm testing fine, medium, and coarse stones individually. Then I'm taking the best from those and I'm making what's called a dual grit edge. If you're new to the channel, a dual grit edge is where you sharpen one side coarse or medium and the other side of the edge you sharpen fine. It has some really interesting characteristics. Usually it creates an aggressive edge that lasts longer than it normally would with either coarse or fine, with some exceptions, which we're testing to find out. Anyway, my test consists of, I've got a little goofy rig that I slice through a 1 centimeter thick sisal rope, and it's on a 45-degree wedge. It's intended to transfer that force down, and then I measure how many kilograms of pressure it took to slice through the rope while holding the rope vertical. That's intended to take forward motion and quantify how much pressure it took to slice through. This gives you some rough idea of edge aggression. The next test is to cut through a 40mm thick Manila rope, and then I test on a best machine tester to test how keen and nice the edge stayed. I do that until it's over 400 grams on the best tester, checking with microscope and checking to see when it loses shaving capability in between tests. After 3, I will hammer the edge into a pine piano leg, and that's just to see if any of the edges break on impact. There are certain sharpening methods I've found that create an edge that's not as robust to impact tasks, and I want to kind of weed those out because for a working edge, I want it to be reasonably durable. Anyway, that's what we're testing for today. In just a second, we'll skip right over to the test footage, and I will let you know what the finishing stone that we're actually testing was. What's up, guys? We're back testing the medium side of that Norton Crystolon stone, and we have a pleasant surprise of being a little bit lower on the best than the coarse side at 282, but still definitely a coarse stone. Now, with these more medium grit edges, I'm kind of trying to weed out if any of them deburr a little bit better than the coarse while still preserving a lot of that texture. We've got a 1.8 kg net slicing aggression going on, which used to be kind of like our record number before the Spyderco 800 grit CBN stone just smashed everything with 0.2 kg. The texturing is definitely a lot more gentle on this side of the stone than if you saw on my last test, but it still looks pretty nice, and it definitely has cleaned up from any potential bending a little bit better. A little slower to get through the rope, but it's still definitely put in a spirited effort. And just like the coarse stone, we're over 400 grams on the first test. It does still pop a few hairs, doesn't shave, but just pops a few. And it was aggressive enough that I figured I'd give it one more pass since the coarse actually ended up recovering some keenness. And again, the Crystolon comes through with a number under 400 and even a third pass that is under 400, which is a surprise. It's almost the best so far. So very strange when coarse edges get worn away to fine edges and then come back with better best numbers than they had initially. I'll freeze this at the highest reading that it hits for overall a 4.2 kgs in slicing aggression. So if you calculate it out, it's lost 2.4 kg, which is not the best that we've had, but is pretty good in terms of the overall standing of our middle grit stones. It's definitely visible that it has smoothed out somewhat, and that's been pretty typical across the board on these water stones and softer stones, but you do still see a little bit of heavy texturing in different places on the edge. Overall, it's not a bad result for the Norton Crystolon sort of medium grit side, but we'll take it to the toughness test anyway and just make sure none of that edge actually rolls over and drastically changes our best number. I got the corner of the pedestal up because the best machine bounces all over the place when I hammer the dumbbell in, but after some adjustments we see that it returns a number of 476, which is a rather concerning amount, one of the worst in terms of observed loss. This is the impact area of the edge, and as is typical, I do find it a little bit difficult to visually locate, although at the edges of the impact zone it does seem like the edge steps up a little bit, so perhaps it's indented or damaged somewhat. Anyway, we'll test a slightly different portion of edge to see how long the actual wear resistance lasts, but perhaps the Norton Crystolon medium side is pretty good for edge cleanup, but doesn't produce the toughest edge without some adjustments to your stropping technique, which I've tried to just strop everything lightly and the same so that we can really observe the effects of the stones themselves. And that will close us off of the test at 515 grams. If you want to see the last test where I tested the coarse side of this stone, it's on screen now. For all the rest of you, I'll just say, hey, peace out from the home slice.